Welcome to Talking to AI about AI. I've taken to talking to AI in the car, dialing back the playlists and podcasts. We work through ideas on business, my art, and realistic, and sometimes far-reaching AI use cases. Today, we're talking about different approaches for honing models on your own data, training models, fine-tuning, and plain old prompt engineering. If you're wondering, this is my actual conversation with a chatbot where we verbally talk back and forth. What you're listening to is a slimmed down transcript. Just took down on the time, but it is the actual discussion, then fed through text-to-voice AI to generate what you're hearing. This is my clone voice and a completely made-up collaborator voice. It's my buddy Chris, the collaborator.
Hey there, great to be back.
Okay, so in terms of AI, I often hear people talk about companies training their own models. Is that an accurate way to describe it typically? Or is the difference between training a model and fine-tuning a model something to consider?
Yes, the terms training and fine-tuning in artificial intelligence do have distinct meanings, and it's great that you're looking into the nuances. Training a model from scratch means building its knowledge base from zero, requiring extensive data and resources. Fine-tuning, however, modifies an existing model to specialize in a specific task using less time and resources by adjusting the model to new data. Both approaches have their uses. Starting from scratch for completely new capabilities and fine-tuning for efficiency and leveraging pre-existing knowledge. The choice between training and fine-tuning depends on the specific needs and context of the task at hand, with fine-tuning often preferred for its resource efficiency.
So if a company wanted to, let's say, tune a model or focus a model on a specific data set, let's say, all kinds of sales information, which could include numbers metrics, but could also include qualitative information like customer reviews, complaints, and so on. Would that be considered fine-tuning a model, probably starting with a large language model? Or would there be a benefit from training a model from scratch on that information?
In the scenario you're describing, where a company wants to focus a model on a specific data set that includes a mix of quantitative and qualitative information related to sales, fine-tuning a pre-trained large language model is often the more practical and efficient approach. Here's why. From a starting point perspective, models pre-trained on diverse text data offer a rich understanding of language and context, ideal for analyzing customer feedback. On efficiency and cost, fine-tuning uses existing knowledge, requiring less data and resources than trained from scratch, significantly cutting costs. Fine-tuning may improve adaptability. It customizes the model to specific business needs, enabling it to grasp industry-specific language and sales metrics accurately. And of course, on time to deployment, fine-tuning accelerates development, allowing for quicker iterations and model optimizations, providing competitive edge and deployment speed. However, there could be situations where training from scratch might be considered, such as if the available pre-trained models are not suitable for your task due to significant differences in domain or language. If you have a very large and unique data set that a model trained from scratch could leverage more effectively than a general pre-trained model. If data privacy or security concerns prevent using pre-trained models which were trained on publicly available data for most business applications, especially those dealing with a mix of qualitative and quantitative data like sales information, fine-tuning a pre-trained model is usually the most practical starting point. It provides a good balance between performance, cost, and time to deployment.
Okay. Well, what about if your data set was only quantitative? It did not have things like reviews or other text-based or language-based information. It was all numbers. For example, maybe you were trying to create a model that really understands traffic patterns. You had a large data set. Just numbers of cars on the road, numbers of intersections, numbers of streetlights, stop signs, yield times a day, and it wasn't really based on language. But somehow, you are able to define a series of parameters that have values including all these numbers. Track, would it be better to train from scratch? Or is fine-tuning still preferred?
For a data set that's purely quantitative, like the traffic patterns example you provided, which involves numbers of cars and so on without any text-based information, the approach might differ from the language model scenario. In this case, since the data is not language-based, the focus would shift towards models specifically designed for numerical or time series data, such as those used in machine learning for forecasting, pattern recognition, or regression analysis. When training from scratch for highly specialized quantitative tasks like understanding traffic patterns, training a model from scratch could be more relevant. This is because the model needs to learn from the specific patterns, correlations, and possibly causal relationships inherent in the traffic data, which might be quite different from the knowledge captured by pre-trained language models, which are typically focused on language understanding.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
that said with these specialized models, while you might now want to use general purpose language models, you might use models specifically designed for numerical data analysis or for time series data to understand patterns over different times of day or days of the week. If there are pre-trained models available that have been trained on related quantitative tasks, for example, other types of time series forecasting models, fine-tuning such a model with your specific traffic data could still be an option. This could accelerate the learning process if the pre-trained model's architecture and learned patterns are transferable to your domain. In essence, if there are pre-existing models trained on similar types of quantitative data, fine-tuning those models with your specific data set could provide a head start and lead to better performance with less effort.
Got it. So really, we're saying fine-tuning is generally going to have an advantage because it's leveraging something the model already knows and understands. In the case of a language model that's fine-tuned, its understanding of language in general is a significant benefit. Then simply fine-tuning to a specific data set allows the model to be able to focus. But you didn't teach it how to speak. You just gave it information about what to speak about. But when looking at something that is more quantitative based, things involving numbers only, for example, the traffic example that I mentioned, there still is a potential for being able to leverage models that don't understand your data set necessarily, but do understand some of the tasks that you're looking for. Pattern recognition, understanding how to work with time-based situations, other things that people do with numbers. So it seems like if a model is available, there's often a resource benefit to fine-tuning that existing model because you don't have to teach it as much stuff. Do I have that correct?
Yes, you got it exactly right. The fine-tuning leverages the foundational knowledge a model has already acquired, which provides a significant advantage because it reduces the amount of learning the model needs to do. This foundational knowledge can be about language or about patterns, correlations, and behaviors in numerical data, as with models designed for quantitative analysis.
Okay, so in the spirit of weighing pros and cons, let's say money and time aren't issues. Say I can train a model, say I have enough data to train a model from scratch on a particular data set with all of the details it needs to understand what it needs to provide the output I'm looking for. But say there are existing models that I can fine tune, models that have the ability to understand pattern recognitions that I'm looking for in other tasks. But it doesn't have the specific data I want to use it for. And then I train a model from scratch and fine tune another based on an existing model, both with the same data set. Are there any benefits or trade-offs when using those models, one versus the other? Or are they effectively going to be similar?
When comparing training a model from scratch to fine-tuning an existing model, each approach has distinct benefits and trade-offs, even when resources aren't limited. Training from scratch offers customization and control, allowing you to tailor the model specifically to your data and task. This can lead to a highly optimized model, but requires careful tuning to avoid overfitting or underfitting. Fine-tuning utilizes transfer learning to apply knowledge from a broadly trained model to a specific task. This can result in quicker convergence and potentially better generalization, making it efficient for iterating and deploying solutions. But let's talk about trade-offs. A scratch-trained model may excel with familiar data, but struggle with new inputs. Fine-tuned models might generalize better, but risk overfitting to the new data set. Starting from scratch encourages innovation and discovery, and fine-tuning is more about leveraging existing knowledge efficiently. The choice depends on your specific needs, including how unique your data set is and whether your priority is innovation or efficiency.
This all makes a lot of sense. A lot to think about, right?
Indeed. But let's talk about effectiveness real quick. Effectiveness of either approach can depend on the complexity of the task and the quality of the data. If the pre-trained model's initial training data and tasks are closely aligned with your objectives, fine-tuning might yield comparable or even superior results more efficiently. Conversely, if the task is highly specialized or different from typical tasks pre-trained models are designed for, a model trained from scratch could potentially offer better performance, given that it's been optimized specifically for that task.
Got it. So there are still pros and cons. There are a few examples that you gave that stood out to me. It seems that fine-tuning a pre-trained model might be able to leverage that pre-trained model in a way that perhaps fills in the gaps of your data. There might be situations where your data is insufficient on its own, but might be able to benefit from the pre-trained information, not just in data points, what it knows, but how it thinks about the data and what you want to do with the model. The second thing that stood out to me, and I hadn't considered this one, but you're absolutely right, it's kind of obvious in hindsight, is the ability to more quickly iterate. That obviously needs to be taken into consideration as well. Ongoing maintenance and then updates and upgrades are as important to consider as just the general use. But over or underfitting is also a consideration. A fine-tuned model may have a task. competing with its underlying desire to do things the way the original model might have wanted to do it. So everything that you said makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, let's take it one step further. Comparing fine tuning to just including instructions along with a data set in your prompts. So you have an existing model, not going to train or fine tune it, but you want to leverage some specific data. How might that compare to fine tuning a model? Let's use the example of leveraging customer feedback, including reviews, customer complaints, and so on. And you had all that documented.
Comparing the process of fine-tuning a model with incorporating specific data into instructions or prompts is about weighing different aspects of flexibility, specificity, scalability, and ease of implementation. Let's start with the pros of fine-tuning. Fine-tuning adapts the model's parameters specifically to the nuances of your dataset, potentially leading to a deeper understanding and better performance on tasks closely related to your data. Once fine-tuned, the model consistently applies the learned patterns from the specific dataset across all interactions without needing to provide context or examples in each interaction. For large-scale applications, a fine-tuned model can directly and efficiently handle relevant queries without additional input or context, saving time and computational resources in each interaction. For cons, fine-tuning is resource-intensive. It requires computational resources and expertise to adjust the model correctly, although this is mitigated if resources are not a concern. Updating the model to reflect new data or changes in the data set requires fine-tuning, which can be additionally resource-intensive. Now, let's get into incorporating data into prompts. It's flexible, easy to implement, and you can iterate rapidly. You can dynamically adjust the examples or information provided in prompts to fit the specific needs of each interaction, offering great flexibility without needing to retrain or fine-tune the model. Doesn't require the computational resources and expertise of fine-tuning, making it accessible for more users and use cases. This is great for testing different prompt strategies. For prompts cons, it may give inconsistent output over time, especially if the prompts vary slightly from one to the next. On scalability, especially in large-scale applications, manually tailoring prompts for specific interactions can be impractical. And possibly most importantly, it will likely have limited depth. While providing specific examples or context and prompts can guide the model's responses, it may not achieve the same depth of understanding or customization as a fine-tuned model, especially for complex or nuanced tasks. So overall, fine-tuning provides specific, consistent customization, but requires resources. It's scalable for widespread use. Prompt-based methods offer flexible, easy iteration, but maybe less scalable and offer surface-level customizations. The choice hinges on your need for specificity. Resources and scalability, fine-tuning suits large, critical projects, while prompts are ideal for exploratory or smaller tasks.
Okay. Flexibility and the ease of implementation or iteration definitely are points for the prompt scenario, for sure. And consistency is something that is certainly desirable. But with things like custom GPTs or Hugging Face just released a similar concept, being able to define how a particular instance of a model works, meaning you're plugging in instructions and data to that model so that it's used every time the model is used without the user adding it. Users just interact with the model, and it's always using the same data the same way. And likewise, you could always build a custom application, pointing to certain documents, or it might even be real-time information feeding into it. The data would be easy to update, and every time somebody uses it, the right data is injected in the conversation without user involvement. So that seems to tackle the consistency issue, but still makes use of the flexibility of the prompt approach. Wouldn't that tip the scales in favor of prompts over fine-tuning even more?
Yes, you're correct in your understanding, and the approaches you've outlined do indeed tilt the balance further towards the flexibility and ease of implementation offered by prompt-based interactions, while also addressing consistency concerns. Incorporating specific instructions or data sets into the operation of a model, either through custom GPTs, tools like those released by Hugging Face, or bespoke applications, offers a compelling blend of consistency, flexibility, and ease of implementation. This approach significantly enhances the appeal of prompt-based interactions for many applications, especially where the prompt itself or the underlying data may evolve over time.
Is there a difference in just the output of the information pairing the prompt approach versus the fine-tuned approach? Forget about the real-time data, the ease of implementation, the consistency, all of that kind of stuff. But just in terms of using the models, assuming that both have the ability to have consistent information, they both have the same information, are there any differences to the performance of a request and response situation when using the two different approaches?
Yes, there can be differences in the output and performance between using a model that has been fine-tuned versus using a prompt-based approach, even if both have access to the same information and are applied in consistent request-response scenarios. A fine-tuned model is specifically optimized to understand and generate responses based on the nuances of the data set it was trained on. This can lead to outputs that are more closely aligned with the specific patterns, terminology, and styles present in the training data. The responses might also be more accurate or relevant to the domain-specific queries because the model has been directly adjusted to handle such queries. With a prompt-based approach, while a sophisticated prompt can guide a model to produce remarkably relevant and accurate outputs, there might be subtle differences in how well it captures the nuances of the specific dataset or domain, especially if the prompt does not perfectly encapsulate the complexity of the task or the dataset. The model relies on its general knowledge and the context provided in the prompt, which might not fully replicate the depth of understanding achieved through fine-tuning. On consistency and predictability, fine-tuned model outputs are generally more consistent and predictable for the specific types of queries the model was fine-tuned on. This is because the model's internal weights have been adjusted to favor responses that align with the fine-tuning data. With a prompt-based approach, the effectiveness and consistency of the outputs can vary based on the skill with which the prompts are crafted. Even with a high level of skill in prompt engineering, there might be more variability in the model's outputs compared to a fine-tuned model, as the response depends on how the model interprets the provided context or examples within the prompt. Then there's adaptability to new information. With fine-tuned models, introducing new information or changing the model's focus requires fine-tuning, which can be resource intensive. The model's performance is optimized for the data it was trained on, and it may not adapt as readily to new types of queries or information without additional training. A prompt-based approach offers more flexibility to adapt to new information or changing requirements simply by modifying the prompts. This can be particularly useful in dynamic fields or when dealing with evolving data sets, allowing for quicker adaptation to new data or questions without the need for retraining, but the depth of knowledge may be more superficial.
Okay, so if I were to think of an analogy, it feels a little bit like what you're saying, is you have two buddies who know some specific task or skill, but one really deeply knows it. He's an expert. He's been doing it for a long time and it's in his bones. And the other one knows the same information, but perhaps doesn't know it as intimately. Like maybe he just learned it. So when you ask them both a question, the person who really understands it, they're consistently going to give you some accurate information. Where the person who is new to the information might not get it the same way every time. It may be accurate, but perhaps it might be a little inconsistent each time. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, your analogy captures the essence of the difference between a fine-tuned model and using a prompt-based approach quite well. The expert buddy fine-tuned model, this buddy is like the fine-tuned model. They've been trained specifically in the task or skill, making them an expert. They've spent a lot of time learning the ins and outs, nuances, and specifics. Yeah, so when you ask them something related to their area of expertise, they're likely to give you a detailed, accurate, and consistent answer every time because their knowledge is deep and tailored to the subject. The knowledgeable buddy prompt-based approach, this buddy knows a lot, perhaps because they've read about the subject or discussed it with others, but they haven't been trained or practiced in the specific skill to the same depth as the expert. They can still provide valuable information and might even surprise you with how much they know based on the context or examples you give them. However, their responses might vary more in accuracy or detail because their understanding isn't as deeply rooted in personal experience or specialized training. The expert buddy fine-tuned model is likely to be more reliable for questions within their domain of expertise, offering consistency and depth. The knowledgeable buddy prompt-based model, while versatile and capable of discussing a wide range of topics, might not always hit the mark with the same precision, especially on more complex or nuanced topics. This analogy helps illustrate why choosing between these approaches depends on what you need: the depth and consistency of an expert or the broad, adaptable knowledge of a well-informed generalist.
I really like that extension to the analogy of somebody who is really experienced because they've been doing something for a long time, or they've been trained and taught how to do something in a very deep way, compared to somebody who just read about something or talked about it with friends. Understanding that knowledge gained from the training and the personal experience really highlights how deep somebody understands something versus somebody who is just book smart about a thing. Let me ask you this. Are any of these models, trained model, a fine-tuned model, or one that use a prompt or instruction-based approach, more or less likely to hallucinate? I'm wondering if hallucinations might come from perhaps a pre-trained model where it has information outside of the specifics of your data, and that confuses things so that it invents situations. Or if hallucinations come from a lack of information, you're from scratch trained model. Or if the prompt-based approach is more likely to hallucinate because it's trying to use information that was recently given to it, but it's got too much other stuff in the underlying model. Are any of these approaches more or less likely to hallucinate? And if so, why?
The issue of hallucinations in the AI models, where a model generates information or answers that are incorrect or not based on real data, is a nuanced one. And the likelihood of hallucination can vary across different approaches due to several factors. If a model is trained from scratch and the dataset has gaps or lacks diversity, the model might hallucinate by filling in these gaps with incorrect or fabricated information, especially if it tries to generalize beyond its training data. This will depend on data quality. The quality, completeness, and representativeness of the training dataset are crucial. A well-curated dataset can reduce the likelihood of hallucinations. Fine-tuning can help reduce hallucinations in the domain or dataset it's fine-tuned on, as the model has been specifically adjusted to understand this data better. However, if the fine-tuning process introduces biases or if the fine-tuning dataset has errors, these could lead to specific types of hallucinations related to the fine-tuned knowledge. With instruction of prompt-based approaches, it's a balancing act. Prompt-based approaches can be both prone to and protective against hallucinations. On one hand, if the prompt effectively guides the model to focus on its reliable knowledge, it can reduce hallucinations. On the other hand, overly broad or ambiguous prompts might lead the model to draw from less relevant or accurate parts of its training, increasing the chance of hallucination. All types of models can hallucinate under certain conditions. Hallucinations often stem from the model trying to make sense of or generate information for inputs that it hasn't been adequately trained on or for which the training data was ambiguous or sparse. The complexity of the model and the diversity and quality of the training data play significant roles. Gaps in data, biases, and the inherent limitations of the model's understanding can all contribute to hallucinations. Providing clear context and constraints within prompts can help mitigate hallucinations in prompt-based approaches by narrowing down the model's focus to areas where it has reliable knowledge. And so in summary, no approach is entirely immune to hallucinations, but each has mechanisms that can mitigate or exacerbate the issue.
Let me ask you one thing that's even further from what we've been talking about, but just one last scenario: image models. There's a concern for artists using AI because it's trained on other people's work and a host of other concerns. But one approach that's talked about to avoid inappropriately borrowing someone else's work is to focus a model on one's own particular style, the way that they themselves work. And then we're really only talking about AI being used to make an artist more efficient, producing the kind of work with the same intentions and meaning and style and approach that the artist was already doing. So navigating around some of the concerns, perhaps not all, but some of the concerns that artists and people who appreciate art may have, what would the best approach be to helping a model focus on an artist's particular style? Is it even possible, realistically, for an artist to train a model from scratch? Would fine-tuning be a better approach? Or would it still be resource prohibitive, given that most artists don't have thousands of pieces? And how effective would using a prompt or instruction-based approach work, particularly since we're talking about images, not language or something quantifiable, and so the process, I'm sure, would be different? Or is there another way that somebody trying to guide a model towards a particular style and approach visually? Are there other ways that that could be done?
Navigating the use of AI in the realm of art, especially in a way that respects individual artists' styles and concerns about copyright and originality, is a nuanced challenge. When considering how best to help a model focus on an artist's particular style, several approaches can be considered, each with its advantages and limitations. For most individual artists, training a model from scratch to capture their unique style could be impractical. This process would require not only a large data set of their work, but also significant computational resources and technical expertise. Even if possible, training from scratch might limit the model's understanding to only the specific inputs it has been trained on, potentially missing out on broader artistic techniques, mediums, or the evolution of style over time. Fine-tuning an existing image generation model on a smaller dataset of an artist's work could be more feasible. This approach can leverage the model's existing knowledge of various artistic styles and techniques, then adjust it to focus more closely on the nuances of the particular artist's style. The effectiveness of fine-tuning might still be limited by the size of the artist's available data set. Moreover, the concerns about using other people's work as part of the model's base training remain pertinent. For image models, prompts are usually based on text descriptions, though it's common for image-to-image tools that can be applied when prompting. An artist could use detailed text descriptions and sample images that encapsulate the essence of their style, desired themes, and techniques to guide the AI in generating images that align with their vision. This method relies heavily on the ability of the artist to articulate their style and the model's capability to interpret and translate those descriptions into visual output. The results can vary widely and may require iterative refinement. Another approach is using style transfer techniques, where the stylistic elements of an artist's work are applied to content generated by the AI. This can be a way to blend the artist's unique style with new creations. any approach should be mindful of the ethical implications, ensuring that artists' rights are respected and that AI serves as a tool for enhancing creativity rather than replacing or replicating individual artists' work without consent. Ideally, development in this area would involve artists in the creation and training of AI models, ensuring that the technology is used ethically and effectively to augment human creativity.
All right. Thanks a lot. This has been really helpful in understanding the different levels of focusing models to a specific use case or data set. I really appreciate you taking the time to help walk me through some of these. It's been very enlightening and things are very clear to me now. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. I'm glad I could help clarify things. This was fun. If you ever have more questions, whether they're about AI, art, or any other topic, feel free to reach out. Happy exploring, and I wish you the best in your projects.
Okay. That wraps up today's chat with some basic definitions. Thank you all for tuning in to Talking to AI about AI. We've unpacked the concepts of training, fine-tuning, and prompts. If you've had questions on these terms, I hope that this clarified things for you. And of course, your curiosity fuels our conversations, and your support makes all the difference. If you found value in our discussion today, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback not only encourages us, but helps others discover our show. Remember, we're here to explore the vast potential of AI together, breaking down complex concepts and envisioning future applications. So keep those questions coming and don't hesitate to reach out with topics you'd love us to cover. Signing off, we're grateful for your time and eagerness to learn alongside us. Stay curious, and until next time, happy exploring.